Hello everyone, Trophy Wine Hunter. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm doing a review of a very notable champagne which I'm really excited to finally get my hands on. This is the Krug latest vintage. This is the 172nd edition. Krug is a really interesting champagne house because most people think of non-vintage champagne as lesser than vintage champagne, but Krug does not apply to that formula. In fact, most vintage champagnes are not even at the same level as Krug in terms of pricing. It's funny how Krug gets all this respect, but another very similar house in terms of how they do things, Ace of Spades, gets no respect. But that's a topic for another discussion. But anyways, let's focus on Krug on this video. So Krug was a house that was established in 1843 by Joseph Krug, and he believed that champagne houses should produce cuvées with both non-vintage champagnes, so that the champagne blending delivered a expression of that house year after year, which many champagne houses do with their non-vintage champagnes, and also a vintage version of the champagne that expresses the best of the conditions of that individual year. And he actually believed that all cuvées should be equal, and it shouldn't be a vintage or non-vintage is better, but it's a different expression and a different, there's no hierarchy. And that's what I believe also, that really it's about personal preference. If you like non-vintage champagnes better than a vintage champagne, then you're probably pretty lucky, because that's most of the time less expensive. Maison Krug owns about 21 hectares of vineyard, and they supplement their champagne with grapes grown from local growers who have been sending grapes to the Krug blend for many years. To promote aging, they actually pick grapes that are higher in acidity and lower in sugar. The residual sugar generally is around 6.5 grams per liter, so it's a little bit less, I would say, in terms of drier content than a champagne like Dom or let's say Cristal. Cristal is about 10 grams per liter. Ace of Spades, I think, is up between 11 and 13. But it's funny because when I drink Krug, I actually find it a little bit more creamier and actually sweeter than Dom per non, even though its residual sugar level is lower. The wine is vinified in 205 liter oak barrels that on average are 20 years of age. And then after fermentation, the wine is stored for 7 years before release for the Grande Cuvée, and for the vintage champagnes, they're actually stored for 10 years before release. And the process of that, storing them this long, results in a rich style that shows a lot of acidity in youth, and then also benefits from further aging. Prior to 2016, they just had the base year. They told you what the base year is. Now they actually name the edition number. So this is the 172nd edition. I think prior vintages, you might not find the actual edition number on it, but you can kind of look it up by the base year. So in general, there's always a base year where about 50% of the grapes are taken for that year. And for the 172nd edition, it's the 2016 vintage. But there's more than 120 different wines from 10 different vintages that are in each edition of the Grande Cuvée. And for the 172nd edition, the oldest wines used are from 1998. Beginning in 2011, they started to identify the base wine with a code that could be entered on their website. And then in 2016, they started to actually have the edition number. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to show that in the video, but there is a code on the back of the champagne, and you just scan the barcode, and then it goes up to the site, and it'll tell you everything you need to know about the champagne, including which grape years were used in the champagne and the blend. So the blend for the 172nd edition is 44% Pinot Noir, 36% Chardonnay, and 20% Pinot Meunier. I have previously done a video on the unboxing of this, but I thought I'd just do it again because it's such a beautiful box. It's quite simple. It's got this, it tells you to get the ID, and then it's simple. So if you look at the actual champagne, it now says the 172nd edition. I think in prior labels, it didn't actually tell you. And it, 2011, 2016, it just gave you a code. Prior to that, you kind of just had to know. So you'll see on the back of this has got a code number. So either you can scan it, usually works, or if it doesn't work, you can just put in this ID number and it'll tell you the champagne. That's also a thing that helps to just make sure that there's authenticity, because I guess if you scan the code or you scan the ID and it's a different champagne or a different vintage, then you know that it's probably incorrect or fake. Taste the champagne. I'll let you know that I have had it open now for a day. I had it at one of my favorite hot pot restaurants, the Doler Shop in Richmond, and I thought it paired really well with the hot pot food. In fact, I thought it got a little bit heavier, and one of the notes that I had was that I think this champagne really goes well with food and actually improves with food. It's a little bit heavy on the heavy side, so when you get the food, it actually is quite right. I find it just drinking as a sipping champagne, it's a little heavy and almost acidic a little bit. So let's taste it. I will note there is lots of bubbles in this. I'm using a regular white wine glass. Most people now do not use flutes. The reason being is that flutes really are great for aesthetics. They give you this stem that you will have lots of bubbles and it looks great, but it's really hard to get your nose in there and it doesn't really let the champagne open up. So for really good champagne, you really want to have a little bit bigger, wider rim so that you can get the aromas of the champagne. So on the aroma, it is quite heavy. It's got a little bit of yeastiness and toastiness and creaminess. It does have the like peach and apricots a little bit, but mostly and a little bit of citrus, but not as citrusy as many other champagnes, but quite a toasty oak aroma on it and a little bit maybe of nuttiness too. On the taste, again, it's not as citrusy or acidic as some of the other champagnes out there. I think it's got an apple, almost like a granny apple type taste to it with some tangerines. But you have that underlying weight. It's quite weighty compared to most champagnes. And I can compare it to different ones that I've had. I think even though the residual sugar on this champagne is the same as Dom Perignon, is about 6.5. I find this champagne a little bit sweeter or not as dry as Dom and maybe a little bit more classy, a little bit more elegant. I think it's a little bit more creamy than Dom. As compared to Cristal, Cristal is much lighter and much sweeter. And then the same thing with Ace of Spades is much sweeter. It's not as heavy. This is quite heavy, and Dom already is quite a heavy champagne, but and I think Dom goes well with maybe a little bit heavier foods. This goes really nicely with seafood, with hot pot, with Asian food. It's got a weightiness that's hard to describe, but not, it's a very elegant weightiness. Dom's weightiness is a little bit more rough. I don't know how you describe it, not as elegant. It's more rustic in terms of its heaviness of the body. This is very light or elegant, but still very weighty on the palate. You get a lot of that toastiness on the end of the aftertaste here. Very long aftertaste, and a lot of apples and apricots and peaches, in my opinion. Then going on to a little of caramel. So I think it's actually quite young. And if you look at the champagne, Krug, the base vintage is 2016. Most champagne houses are releasing Like for instance, Dom is releasing, I think 2013 and 2015. So I think this is a little bit young. It could perhaps use a little bit more age. I think it's quite youthful. I would actually wait on this for maybe another 5 years. I think it really pick up a little bit of more secondary and tertiary nuances, a little bit more weightiness, a little bit more nuttiness. So I think it's quite young. My rating of the champagne at this point is 93 points. It is a great champagne, but I do think it does need, for Krug, my recommendation is that when you buy a new Krug, that maybe you wait about 5 years or 8 years for maximum pleasure. I think it is obviously spectacular champagne at this point already, but I think it really hits its peak after a little bit more aging. Hope you've enjoyed this review. Until next time, happy drinking.